On Father's Day morning, my daughter sent me what I thought was a heartfelt surprise. But when my wife saw the package, her face went pale as she whispered urgently, "William, don't you dare open that." I looked closer and froze in absolute terror. 10 minutes later, police sirens wailed down our quiet street. What was inside that innocent-looking box would destroy our family forever. But before we dive into this shocking tale, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to me. Dad, do you even grasp that I need this money now, not when you're 6 feet under? The coffee mug exploded against our hardwood floor, sending ceramic shards flying like tiny missiles. Dark liquid splashed across the Persian rug Jessica and I had carefully chosen for our 20th anniversary. My daughter Samantha stood there, chest heaving, her perfectly manicured fingers still trembling from the violence of her outburst. I clutched those inheritance documents so tightly my knuckles turned bone white. 30 years of meticulous planning, sacrifice, and love, now being wielded like weapons in my own daughter's desperate, grasping hands. "Samantha," I said, my voice deadly quiet, "I am not your personal ATM machine. You'll receive your inheritance when the time is right." Peter, her unemployed husband, sank deeper into our leather sofa, that smug grin spreading wider across his face like poison. "Come on, Will. She's your only flesh and blood. What's a few measly thousand to help your own daughter?" A few thousand? This man had absolutely no shame, no boundaries whatsoever. Last month it was his gambling debts that nearly destroyed them. The month before, Samantha's shopping addiction had maxed out every credit card. The desperate pleas never ceased. They only grew more brazen, more demanding. "Help you out?" I rose slowly from my chair, my 66-year-old joints screaming in protest. "I've been helping you out for 3 straight years. My retirement savings aren't your personal piggy bank." Jessica appeared in the doorway like a ghost, dish towel twisted in her white-knuckled grip. "Please, everyone, let's just calm down and discuss this like civilized adults." "Civilized?" Samantha whirled toward her mother, eyes blazing with fury. "He's hoarding hundreds of thousands while we're drowning in debt." "Debt you created," I said, each word dropping like a stone. "Debt from your choices, your reckless decisions." The family photo on our mantel lay face down. Had it toppled during Samantha's tantrum, or had someone deliberately turned it over? The silver frame caught the overhead light, reflecting nothing but empty, cold brightness where our smiling faces should have been. Peter leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fixing me with calculating eyes. "Listen here, old man. You're not getting any younger. Why not share that wealth while you're still breathing to see it appreciated?" Old man. The disrespect tasted like bile in my throat. This from someone who'd never held a steady job, who lived like a parasite off my daughter's credit cards and my misguided generosity. Because I worked 43 years for every dollar. Each word came out harder, sharper than the last. 43 years of 12-hour shifts, missed family dinners, canceled vacations. So you could have a comfortable childhood, Samantha. So your mother and I could retire with some dignity intact. Dignity? Samantha's laugh was harsh, bitter as winter wind. What's dignified about hoarding money while your own daughter suffers? Suffers? I stared at her designer handbag, her fresh salon highlights, her expensive jewelry glittering under our lights, Peter's brand new sneakers that cost more than some people's rent. Their suffering looked remarkably comfortable to me. Your suffering is completely self-inflicted. The words escaped before I could stop them. Every crisis, every emergency, every desperate midnight phone call, you orchestrated them all. The silence stretched taut as a piano wire about to snap. Jessica stepped fully into the room, her face ghost pale. "William," she whispered desperately. "Should what?" Samantha's voice cracked like breaking glass. "Should keep enabling your selfishness? Should keep pretending you're a loving father instead of a cold-hearted miser?" The accusations hit me like physical blows. Greedy, selfish, unloving. 43 years of sacrifice, and this was my reward. venom from my own flesh and blood. Peter stood up, his expression morphing into something uglier, more menacing. You know what I think, Will? I think you actually enjoy watching us struggle. Makes you feel powerful, doesn't it? Get out. The words erupted from somewhere deep in my chest. Both of you, get out of my house now. Your house? Samantha's eyes glittered dangerously. This house that Mom helped pay for? This house where I grew up, where I belong? You cannot just abandon your own daughter. Watch me. But she wasn't moving. Neither was Peter. They stood there like predators who'd caught the scent of weakness, waiting for me to crumble, waiting for the usual apology, the usual compromise, the usual check written to buy temporary peace. Not this time. Never again. I walked to the front door and threw it wide open. Cool evening air rushed in, carrying the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the distant sound of neighbors' laughter. Normal families having normal conversations. When was the last time we'd laughed together like that? Samantha, I said without turning around, my voice steady as granite. Take your husband and leave my home. Don't come back until you're ready for a respectful conversation about your financial problems and your solutions. Solutions that don't involve raiding my wallet. You'll regret this, she hissed, snatching her purse with violent movements. When you're old and sick and desperate for someone to care about you, remember this moment. Remember how you chose cold cash over your own family. Her heels clicked across our hardwood like gunshots. Peter followed, pausing at the threshold with a sneer that chilled my blood. This isn't over, old man, he muttered. Real family doesn't abandon family. The door slammed hard enough to rattle every window in the house. The silence felt heavier than their shouting had ever been. I stood frozen at that front door, hands still gripping the brass handle like a lifeline. Through the decorative glass panels, I watched Samantha's BMW reverse aggressively out of our driveway, tires spinning on asphalt like she was fleeing a crime scene. Jessica's soft footsteps approached from behind. William. I turned slowly. Our living room looked like a battlefield. Coffee stains had turned our anniversary rug into a monument to family dysfunction. Those inheritance documents lay scattered across the floor like fallen autumn leaves. The overturned family photo caught the lamplight, its silver frame winking mockingly at our shattered peace. 43 years, I whispered more to myself than to her. What? 43 years I worked overtime shifts during her high school years so she could have designer clothes, brand new textbooks, that car for her sweet 16. My voice caught like a sob. The wedding we couldn't afford but paid for anyway, because she was our princess. Jessica knelt down, carefully gathering the scattered papers with movements that spoke of deep, bone-weary sadness. She's struggling, William. She's lost, desperate. The gambling addiction is her choice, I said, words sharper than intended. Every casino visit, every online bet, every lie about where our money disappeared, all her choices. I walked to the mantel and carefully righted that family photo. 5-year-old Samantha smiled back at me, gap-toothed and innocent, perched on my shoulders at the county fair. When had that joyful child transformed into this manipulative stranger demanding my life savings? Remember when she wanted that elaborate dollhouse for Christmas? I asked, touching the glass with trembling fingers. The one from that expensive toy store downtown? I worked double shifts for 2 months straight to afford it. Jessica's silence was answer enough. We both remembered, just like we remembered the ballet lessons, the summer camps, the designer shoes, because all her friends have them. Every sacrifice made gladly, lovingly, for our daughter's happiness. And now she hurls coffee mugs because I won't hand over my retirement fund. She didn't throw it at you, William. She threw it at the floor. The distinction felt meaningless. The violence was identical, whether aimed at me or my possessions. The disrespect was the same. I bent down and picked up one of those inheritance documents. The legal language blurred as I read it, but I knew every clause by heart. Years of meticulous planning, conservative investments, delayed gratification. Also, Samantha would be financially secure after we were gone. It's Peter's influence, Jessica said quietly. He fills her head with toxic ideas about what we owe her. Peter didn't create her greed, Jessica. He just gave it permission to show its true face. The harsh truth hung between us like a sword. Our daughter had become someone we barely recognized, someone we'd enabled by always giving in, always writing checks, always smoothing over her latest crisis with our hard-earned money. My phone buzzed against the coffee table. A text from an unknown number, but I recognized the manipulative writing style immediately. Dad, I hope you're satisfied. Your grandchildren need winter coats and school supplies, but apparently your precious money matters more than their welfare. Don't expect to see Emma and Jake anytime soon. Grandchildren, the ultimate weapon in Samantha's arsenal of manipulation. Emma and Jake, 8 and 6 years old, innocent casualties in their mother's war against my wallet. She knew exactly where to strike for maximum emotional damage. I showed Jessica the message. Her face crumpled like tissue paper. She wouldn't really keep them away from us, would she? But we both knew the answer. She'd weaponized those children before during smaller arguments. A week here, 2 weeks there, whenever we didn't immediately comply with her financial demands. Emma and Jake used as bargaining chips in her endless quest for money. William, maybe we should reconsider. No. The word exploded like a gunshot. Absolutely not. I will not be held hostage by threats about my grandchildren. I refuse to teach Emma and Jake that love can be purchased, that family relationships are financial transactions. Jessica flinched at my vehemence. In 38 years of marriage, she'd rarely witnessed me this coldly furious. Even during our worst arguments, I'd never spoken with such deadly finality. But something fundamental had shifted tonight. Some core understanding about my daughter, about our relationship, about the future I'd imagined for our family. The beautiful illusion of loving sacrifice had shattered as completely as that coffee mug. My phone buzzed again with another text, but I didn't need to read it. The pattern was predictable. Escalating threats, increasing demands, emotional manipulation designed to break my resolve. 6 days later, I sat on our front porch with the Sunday paper, desperately trying to find normalcy in Father's Day morning routine. My coffee had grown cold in the mug, but I clutched it anyway, watching neighbors emerge for their weekend activities like actors in a play about functional families. The Hendersons were loading their car for what looked like a family picnic. The Patels worked in their garden, their genuine laughter carrying across our quiet suburban street like music I'd forgotten how to hear. Jessica moved around inside our kitchen, the soft clatter of breakfast dishes drifting through the open window. We'd spent the week in careful, measured conversation, dancing around the Samantha-shaped hole in our family dynamic. Neither of us had heard from her since that explosive night. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits demanding money or reconciliation. The silence felt unnatural, ominous. In 3 years of financial crisis, Samantha had never gone this long without contact. Usually by day 3, she'd be calling with careful apologies and smaller requests, testing the waters before launching her next major assault on my wallet. But this was different. The completeness of the silence felt calculated, strategic, like the calm before a devastating storm. Part of me felt profound relief. Part of me worried about what she was planning. The rumble of a delivery truck shattered my troubled thoughts. I looked up from the sports section to see a brown UPS vehicle slowing in front of our house. Strange. We weren't expecting anything, and Sunday deliveries were rare unless someone paid premium rates for weekend service. The driver hopped out, consulted his handheld device, then grabbed a medium-sized box from the cargo area. He approached with the professional efficiency of someone working holiday overtime. "William Carr? That's me." "Happy Father's Day," he said with practiced cheer, offering the package and his electronic clipboard. "Someone must think highly of you to pay for Sunday delivery." I signed my name, studying the shipping label as he walked away. No return address visible, just generic shipping information. The box felt surprisingly light for its size, roughly shoebox dimensions, but weighing maybe 2 pounds at most. "Who's that from?" Jessica called from the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "No idea." I carried the package inside, setting it on our coffee table where those inheritance documents had scattered just 6 days earlier. "No return address," she observed, approaching with the cautious curiosity I'd learned to respect over decades of marriage. "Maybe it's from the grandchildren," she suggested, but her tone lacked conviction. "Emma did ask about Father's Day when we saw them last month. Before Samantha had weaponized them against us, before the threats and ultimatums. I pushed those dark thoughts away. "Could be," I agreed, though something felt deeply wrong. The timing seemed too convenient, too calculated, and Emma wouldn't have paid for special Sunday delivery. Jessica leaned closer, examining the box with the methodical attention she brought to everything from grocery shopping to crossword puzzles. Her fingers traced the edges of the shipping label with growing concern. "William," she said slowly, her voice dropping to a whisper, "don't open it." "Why not?" She pointed to something I'd missed completely in my casual handling of the package. "Can't you see them? The holes?" Now that she'd drawn my attention, I could see tiny punctures in the cardboard, barely visible unless you knew to look for them. Small, precise holes that someone had clearly made on purpose. "They're for breathing," Jessica said, backing away from the coffee table, "which means something alive is inside." My stomach dropped like a stone into ice water. "Something alive?" "Something that needs air," Jessica confirmed, her voice tight with growing fear. "The question is, what?" We stood there in our living room, staring at that innocent-looking package as if it might suddenly sprout legs and attack us. The morning sunlight streaming through our windows seemed less warm now, our suburban quiet more sinister and threatening. "Who would send us something alive?" Jessica whispered. But even as she asked the question, I felt cold certainty settling in my chest like lead. The timing, the anonymous sender, the Sunday delivery ensuring we'd be home and unsuspecting. This wasn't a gift from loving grandchildren. This was something else entirely. From inside the box came the faintest sound, a soft rustling that made us both freeze like deer sensing a predator. The sound stopped as quickly as it had started, leaving us in tense, suffocating silence. Jessica grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin through the cotton of my polo shirt. "Did you hear that?" she breathed. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Whatever was in that box was very much alive, and it was waking up. A soft hissing sound emerged from the cardboard, barely audible but unmistakably real. We both froze like statues, staring at the package as if it might explode at any moment. The sound stopped. Silence stretched between us like a held breath taut with terror. Then it came again. Longer this time, more distinct. A hiss that sent ice water through my veins and made every primitive instinct scream danger. Jessica's grip on my arm tightened until her nails bit through fabric. "William," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Call someone, right now." My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, muscle memory taking over while my mind struggled to process what we were facing. The numbers felt foreign under my trembling fingers as pure adrenaline flooded my system. 911, what's your emergency?" "We have a suspicious package," I said, words tumbling out faster than intended. "Something alive inside. Delivered this morning with no return address, and it's making sounds." "Sir, can you describe the sounds you're hearing?" I glanced at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. The hissing had stopped again, but we both knew it would return. "Hissing," I said, my voice cracking on the word. "Like a..." I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the terrifying possibility out loud. "Like a snake," Jessica whispered beside me. "Are there any visible threats or damage to the package?" "No visible damage," I managed. "But there are small holes punched in the cardboard." "Breathing holes?" My voice broke completely on those last words, the full horror of our situation crashing over me. "Sir, I'm dispatching officers to your location immediately." Please maintain safe distance from the package, and do not attempt to open it under any circumstances. Can you move to another room? We're about 6 feet away in our living room. Should we leave the house entirely? Stay inside, but keep your distance. Officers should arrive within 10 minutes. Do not touch or move the package for any reason. 10 minutes felt like an eternity when something dangerous was sitting on our coffee table, growing more active with each passing moment. After I hung up, the weight of realization settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Who could have done this, William? Jessica asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. The question I'd been dreading, but the answer felt terrifyingly obvious. The timing on Father's Day wasn't coincidental. The anonymous sender who knew our address, our schedules, our vulnerabilities, someone angry enough about our recent argument to plan something this elaborate and cruel. I'm afraid to guess, I admitted. But my mind was already there, connecting dots I desperately didn't want to see. The timing. 6 days after our explosive argument. The calculated cruelty of choosing Father's Day. Someone with means, motive, and intimate knowledge of how to hurt us most effectively. Another sound from the box made us both step backward, instinctively. Not just hissing this time, but rustling that suggested movement, something shifting position inside its confined prison. The argument 6 days ago, Jessica said quietly. She was so enraged when she left. She didn't need to say Samantha's name. We were both thinking it, both arriving at the same horrible conclusion through different paths of logic and mounting dread. But this, I gestured helplessly at the package. This isn't just anger, Jessica. This is something far worse. Revenge. The word hung unspoken between us, too ugly and devastating to voice but impossible to ignore. Our daughter, the child we'd raised, supported, and loved despite her destructive choices, had sent us something designed to terrorize us. The box rustled again, more insistently now. Whatever was inside was definitely awake, probably confused by its surroundings, possibly growing agitated by our voices and movement. What kind of person does this to their own parents? Jessica's voice broke on the question, maternal grief cracking her composure. Someone desperate, I said, though the words felt inadequate. Someone who believes they've been wronged beyond forgiveness. But deep in my heart, I knew it was more than desperation driving this. This required planning, calculation, a level of malice that spoke to something fundamentally broken in the relationship between parent and child. Samantha hadn't just lashed out in fury. She'd crafted a deliberate act of psychological warfare, designed to punish us for daring to set boundaries. The sound of car doors slamming outside made us both jump like startled animals. Through our front window, I could see a police cruiser in the driveway, 2 officers walking toward our door with the purposeful stride of professionals trained to handle dangerous situations. Relief flooded through me so quickly it made my knees weak. Help had arrived. Soon, whatever nightmare lurked in that innocent-looking package would be someone else's responsibility to handle safely. The doorbell rang sharp and authoritative in the tense quiet of our home. Officer Todd Reeves filled our doorway, tall, solidly built, with the practiced alertness of someone who'd handled countless domestic emergencies. His nameplate read T. Reeves in crisp black letters. Mr. Carr, I'm Officer Reeves. We received your call about a suspicious package. Yes, thank you for coming so quickly. I stepped aside to let him enter, grateful beyond words for professional intervention. He wiped his boots carefully on our welcome mat before crossing the threshold, a small gesture that somehow made me trust him immediately. Officer, we're just so grateful you're here, Jessica said, appearing in the hallway still wearing her apron, hands twisted with nervous energy. We didn't know what else to do. You did exactly the right thing, ma'am. His voice carried calm authority that began settling my frayed nerves. Can you show me the package? We led him to the living room where that box sat on our coffee table, looking smaller and less threatening now that professional help had arrived. Officer Reeves approached carefully, pulling latex gloves from his utility belt with practiced efficiency. When did this arrive? He asked, beginning his methodical examination. About 35 minutes ago, I said. Special Sunday delivery. Someone paid premium rates for weekend service. He studied the shipping label without touching the box itself. No return address visible. And you heard sounds coming from inside? Hissing, Jessica said quietly, unable to complete the terrifying thought. Like a snake. Officer Reeves finished matter-of-factly. I've handled similar situations before, usually non-venomous species, but we take every precaution regardless. He reached for his radio with the confidence of someone who dealt with this exact scenario multiple times. Dispatch, this is Unit 47 requesting animal control services at 1247 Maple Street. Suspected snake delivery and residential package. The radio crackled back with swift confirmation. 20 minutes for animal control response. Officer Reeves turned back to us, shifting from procedural efficiency to investigative curiosity that made my stomach clench with apprehension. Do you have any idea who might have sent this? The question I'd been dreading since the first hiss emerged from that cardboard prison. I felt Jessica's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond to direct police inquiry. I honestly don't know, I said carefully. Probably just some kids playing pranks. His gaze sharpened slightly, professional instincts detecting the hesitation in my voice. Kids would need access to live animals, shipping materials, knowledge of your home address. This required significant planning and resources. My mouth went dry. He was absolutely right, of course. Someone with means, motive, and intimate knowledge had deliberately sent us a snake on Father's Day. This wasn't random teenage mischief. Have you had any recent conflicts? Family disagreements, neighbor disputes, workplace issues? Family disagreements. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation, forcing me to walk a tightrope between honesty and loyalty to someone who'd just terrorized us. Nothing that would lead to this, I managed, though the words felt like ash in my mouth. Officer Reeves studied my face, noting the obvious hesitation, but professional courtesy prevented him from pushing too aggressively. Instead, he pulled out a small notebook. Any unusual charges on your credit cards recently? Pet stores? Exotic animal suppliers? Anything that might be relevant? The question hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Pet stores. The memory crashed over me with devastating clarity. That charge I'd noticed on last month's statement when I was reconciling accounts. Samantha was still an authorized user on my credit card for emergencies. Reptile Palace, $127.50. I'd assumed it was something innocent for the grandchildren, maybe a class pet or science project. Not a weapon. Never imagining it could be a weapon aimed at my heart. Mr. Carr, are you all right? I forced my expression back to neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. I'm fine, just processing all this. But I wasn't fine. The puzzle pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. The timing, the knowledge of our routines, the access to my credit card, the deliberate cruelty of choosing Father's Day for maximum emotional impact. My daughter had sent me a snake. My own flesh and blood had tried to terrorize me. Will you be filing a formal report? Officer Reeves asked. We can investigate the package origin, pursue charges if we identify the sender. I looked at Jessica, saw the same agonizing conflict reflected in her eyes. Part of me wanted justice, demanded consequences for this unforgivable act. But the larger part, the part that had spent 34 years protecting Samantha despite her mounting flaws, couldn't bring myself to turn her over to police. No, I said quietly, the word tasting like betrayal of my own safety. I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. If it's just a prank, filing charges seems excessive. Officer Reeves made a note, though his expression suggested he'd heard this response countless times before. Family loyalty trumping justice, even when family members crossed dangerous criminal lines. Another vehicle pulled into our driveway, engine rumbling with professional efficiency. Through the window, I could see a white van with Animal Control Services painted in bold blue letters on the side. That'll be Mike Johnson, Officer Reeves said with obvious relief. Best wildlife specialist in the county. He'll have this resolved safely within the hour. But as I watched the animal control officer grab his specialized equipment, I knew the real nightmare was just beginning. The snake was only a symptom of something far more poisonous that had infected our family. Mike Johnson from Animal Control worked with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd handled far stranger situations than ours. Within 20 minutes, he'd safely extracted a 3-foot corn snake from that shipping box, confirmed it was non-venomous, and loaded it into a secure carrier for transport to a local reptile rescue. Beautiful specimen, he said, securing the carrier in his van with professional care. Someone paid serious money for this one. Corn snakes make excellent pets when properly cared for. Real shame someone used it for whatever this was supposed to be. Officer Reeves shook hands with both of us before departing, his parting words echoing in my mind. Call if you remember anything else about possible senders, Mr. Carr. Even pranks like this can escalate dangerously if left unchecked. I nodded, maintaining my facade of cooperation while my mind churned with darker possibilities I couldn't voice to law enforcement. Both vehicles disappeared down our quiet suburban street, leaving Jessica and me alone with the morning's devastating aftermath. Our living room felt different now, violated somehow despite the professional cleanup. The coffee table bore faint water stains where Mike had disinfected the surface. Those scattered inheritance documents had been restacked neatly, but their symbolic power had shifted completely. They were no longer tools of family planning, but evidence of the betrayal that had triggered this morning's terroristic attack. Jessica busied herself in the kitchen, running water with unnecessary vigor, stress cleaning, her standard response to family crisis. I stood at our front window watching the Hendersons return from their Father's Day outing, car loaded with picnic gear and children's laughter echoing like music from another world. Normal families, normal Sunday mornings, normal fathers who didn't receive venomous threats from their own daughters. That credit card charge burned in my memory like a brand seared into flesh. Reptile Palace, $127.50. 3 weeks ago, right after our explosive argument about inheritance. Perfect timing for planning elaborate revenge. My phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I scrolled to Samantha's contact information. Her smiling photo looked back at me, a picture from Emma's birthday party last year, before the financial demands had escalated into outright warfare, before threats about grandchildren access, before this morning's snake delivery. Are you really going to call her? Jessica asked quietly from the kitchen doorway. I need to know for certain. My voice sounded hollow, distant. And if she admits it? The question hung between us like a sword. What would I do if my worst suspicions were confirmed? What action could a father take against a daughter who'd crossed such a fundamental, unforgivable line? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew this conversation was absolutely necessary. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice carrying that artificial brightness she used when hiding something or wanting money. Dad, how's your Father's Day going? The casual cruelty of the question hit me like a sledgehammer. If she was innocent, it was natural small talk. If she was guilty, it was pure, calculated mockery. Interesting morning, actually. I kept my voice carefully neutral. Samantha, you wouldn't happen to know anything about a strange Father's Day gift, would you? No, Dad, what happened? Her response came too quickly, too practiced, but it was what happened next that confirmed my worst fears. In the background, unmistakably, I heard Peter's quiet laughter. Not the surprised chuckle of someone hearing unexpected news, but the satisfied snicker of someone who thought they'd gotten away with something brilliantly clever. The sound hit me like a physical blow, shattering the last fragments of doubt. My daughter had sent me a snake, and her husband found our terror entertaining. Just some confusion with the delivery, I said, fighting desperately to keep my voice steady. Nothing important. I should let you go. Are you sure everything's okay? You sound strange. Strange. I was discovering that my only daughter had tried to terrorize me with a live reptile, and she thought I sounded strange. Everything's fine, Samantha. Enjoy your Sunday. I ended the call before she could respond, before my carefully maintained composure could crack completely. The phone trembled in my hands as the full weight of ultimate betrayal settled over me like a suffocating shroud. Jessica appeared at my side, reading my devastated expression with the intuition earned through 38 years of marriage. "You heard something," she said. It wasn't a question. "Peter laughed," I said, words coming out flat and emotionless. In the background, when she asked what happened, he laughed like it was the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Her hand found my arm, a steadying presence in the shifting, treacherous landscape of our family dynamics. "What are you going to do?" I looked down at the phone, then toward my home office where the computer held access to bank accounts, credit cards, and all the financial tools that had kept Samantha afloat for 3 years of escalating crisis. "I'm going to teach my daughter about consequences," I said with deadly quiet certainty. 7 o'clock found me sitting in my home office, door closed, computer humming quietly in the evening stillness. I'd spent the afternoon in careful thought, walking through our neighborhood, reviewing 30 years of financial decisions that had brought us to this devastating moment. The initial rage had settled into something colder, more purposeful, more permanent. My desk held the accumulated evidence of a father's misguided generosity. Bank statements showing monthly transfers to cover Samantha's rent. Credit card bills I'd paid without question, month after month. Insurance premiums, car payments, emergency loans that were never repaid. 3 decades of enabling disguised as parental love. The leather portfolio beside my keyboard contained documents I'd reviewed dozens of times, copies of checks written for her wedding, receipts from the car I'd sold to pay her gambling debts, bank transfers labeled emergency assistance that had become routine monthly obligations. Each piece of paper told the same story, a daughter who had learned to see her father as an endless source of money rather than wisdom, guidance, or genuine love. The computer screen glowed as I navigated to our online banking portal. My fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, typing familiar passwords I'd never shared with Samantha, though she'd managed to access plenty without them through manipulation and deceit. First, the credit card account. The same one showing that Reptile Palace charge from 3 weeks ago. Samantha appeared as an authorized user, a status I'd granted during college for emergencies. 20-year-old emergencies that had multiplied into a permanent lifestyle of financial dependency. I clicked Manage Users. The system prompted me with security questions. My mother's maiden name, the street where I grew up. Simple answers that unlocked access to tools I should have used years ago. "Remove authorized user," the screen asked in neutral blue text. My cursor hovered over confirm for perhaps 10 seconds, not from hesitation, but from the profound shift I felt occurring within myself. 30 years of funding irresponsibility was ending with a single click. "Enough," I whispered to the empty room and clicked. "User access revoked. Changes will take effect within 1 business hour." Next came PIN changes. Samantha had somehow learned the numbers, probably watching over my shoulder during one of our many financial rescue missions. I selected new digits, the year Jessica and I were married. Numbers that meant everything to our relationship, but nothing to our daughter's schemes. The automated payments required more careful attention. Monthly transfers to her checking account, recurring payment for her car insurance, a subscription service for her gym membership that she'd convinced me was essential for mental health. Each cancellation required confirmation, a digital paper trail of my decision to stop being her private bank, her personal ATM machine. My hands remained rock steady throughout the process. No trembling, no hesitation, no second guessing. This wasn't cruelty, it was overdue accountability, consequences that should have been implemented years ago. I remembered last month's conversation when she'd called sobbing about gambling debts, promising this was the last time, the final crisis I'd need to solve. I'd believed her, transferred another $5,000, and told Jessica we were helping our daughter learn responsibility. Instead, I'd been teaching her that consequences were optional, that manipulation was more effective than maturity. The final screen showed a comprehensive summary of changes, Credit access removed, automatic payments canceled, PIN codes updated. The work of 30 years of enabling undone in 30 minutes of methodical clicking. Save changes. Outside my office window, the suburban evening continued its peaceful rhythm. The Hendersons were grilling dinner in their backyard. Mrs. Patterson walked her small dog past our mailbox. Normal families living normal lives, probably not dealing with adult children who sent live snakes as Father's Day gifts. I clicked, save. The confirmation appeared instantly. Account changes processed. Updated information will be available immediately. Leaning back in my leather desk chair, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to Samantha. Complete, unshakable control. Not the desperate, reactive scrambling to fix her latest crisis, but the calm authority of a parent who'd finally remembered that love sometimes requires saying no. Tomorrow morning, she would discover that her financial safety net had vanished. Her credit card would be declined. Her automatic payments would bounce. Her assumed access to my resources would simply end. For the first time in decades, the consequences of her choices would be entirely her own responsibility to face. The phone on my desk remained silent, but I knew that wouldn't last long. Morning would bring the reckoning she'd earned with that snake. Morning arrived with unusual, profound peace. I sat at our kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper, watching sunlight filter through Jessica's herb garden on the windowsill like liquid gold. For the first time in years, I felt no crushing anxiety about potential financial emergencies, no dread of manipulative phone calls designed to drain my accounts. Jessica moved quietly around the kitchen, refilling my coffee cup with the comfortable efficiency of 38 years of shared mornings. She'd asked no questions about my evening in the office, but her slight knowing smile suggested she understood perfectly what I'd accomplished. The phone rang at exactly 8:15 a.m. Samantha's name appeared on the caller ID, as predictable as sunrise. I let it ring twice more before answering, using those extra seconds to center myself for the storm ahead. "Good morning, Samantha." "Dad, what have you done?" Her voice hit me like a physical assault, shrill with panic and rage. "My card isn't working. I tried to buy groceries and it was declined. The automatic payment for my car insurance bounced. What is happening to me?" I took a deliberate sip of coffee before responding, savoring both the warmth and this moment of absolute power. "Samantha, I know you sent me that Father's Day gift." The silence stretched for several heartbeats, pregnant with guilt and calculation. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted from panic to defensive fury. "You've completely lost your mind. How could you set me up like this?" Set her up. Not, "What are you talking about?" or, "What Father's Day gift?" The woman who had terrorized me with a snake was now accusing me of laying traps. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know about her guilt. "I didn't do anything," I said with deadly calm. "I simply stopped paying for your irresponsibility. This is absolutely insane. You can't just cut me off without warning. I have bills, obligations, responsibilities." Responsibilities. I let the word hang between us like a sword. Like the responsibility to treat your parents with basic human respect? Like the responsibility to handle your own finances instead of leeching off mine? Jessica had stopped her morning routine to watch my face, reading my expressions for signs of stress. But I felt remarkably calm, almost detached from Samantha's hysteria. "Dad, please, you don't understand." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Peter and I are struggling right now. The apartment rent is due and my car payment—" "Your car payment that I've been making for 2 years," I interrupted coldly. "Your apartment rent that comes directly out of my account every month. Perhaps it's time you understood what actual financial responsibility looks like." "Fine." Her voice rose to a pitch that would have concerned me yesterday. "You want to play games? Don't expect to see your precious grandchildren anytime soon. Emma and Jake won't even remember you by the time—" "Samantha." I cut her off with quiet, unshakable firmness. Those threats stopped working yesterday morning. The phone went silent, except for her rapid, panicked breathing. I could almost hear her brain recalibrating, desperately searching for the manipulation tactic that had always worked before. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she whispered, switching to the victim voice that had opened my wallet countless times. "I'm your daughter. I'm struggling. And instead of helping me, you're punishing me for something I didn't even do. Something she didn't even do." Still no direct denial, no confusion about what gift I'd referenced. Just the blanket deflection of someone who knew exactly what she'd done and was furious about facing consequences. "Your struggle is not my responsibility," I said with ice-cold finality. "Your choices created your situation. Your choices sent that package. Your choices will determine what happens next. You're being completely ridiculous." Her mask was slipping. "One little prank, and you totally lose your mind." One little prank. There it was. Not quite a confession, but close enough to confirm what her panicked overreaction had already revealed. She'd sent me a live snake as a little prank, and now expected me to continue funding her lifestyle. A prank involving a dangerous animal isn't little, Samantha, and a father cutting off financial support after 30 years of enabling isn't losing his mind. It's finally finding it. Her voice turned arctic, venomous. "This isn't over, old man. You think you can control me by controlling money? We'll see about that." The line went dead with a sharp click. I set the phone down gently and looked at Jessica, who had watched the entire conversation with growing admiration and relief. The morning sunlight still streamed through her herbs like liquid gold. The coffee still tasted perfect. The peace remained unbroken. "She's coming here," Jessica said quietly, reading the situation with practiced accuracy. I nodded calmly. "Probably with Peter. They'll want to continue this conversation in person." "Are you ready for that confrontation?" I thought about the question seriously. Was I ready for my daughter to arrive at our home with her unemployed husband, demanding access to money she'd never earned, threatening grandchildren she'd already weaponized against us? "Yes," I said with quiet certainty. "I think I am." The sound of a car engine roaring into our driveway shattered the morning calm like an explosion. Tires squealed against asphalt as the vehicle stopped abruptly, followed by the violent slam of two car doors that echoed like gunshots. Jessica and I exchanged a knowing glance. We both understood who had arrived for war. Heavy footsteps marched across our front walkway with determined military rhythm. The doorbell rang once, sharp and demanding, then immediately again when no one answered fast enough for their liking. I stood slowly, feeling remarkably calm despite the approaching storm. "Stay here," I told Jessica quietly. "No." Her voice carried unexpected steel. "We're in this together." The doorbell gave way to aggressive pounding that rattled our front door. I walked to the entrance and opened it to find Samantha and Peter standing on our porch like a two-person army ready for total war. Samantha's face was flushed crimson with rage, her hair disheveled as if she'd dressed hastily and driven here in pure fury. Peter loomed behind her, his expression darker with malice than I'd ever seen directed at me before. "Dad." Samantha's voice vibrated with barely controlled violence. "We need to talk right now." "We already talked this morning," I replied, remaining in the doorway without inviting them inside. "I thought I was quite clear." "Clear?" She laughed harshly, bitterly. "You were completely insane. You can't just cut me off because of some ridiculous misunderstanding about a Father's Day package." Even now, standing on my doorstep demanding money like a common extortionist, she couldn't bring herself to admit what she'd done. The cowardice was almost as infuriating as the original crime. "There's no misunderstanding, Samantha. You sent me a snake," I responded appropriately. Peter stepped forward, his bulk filling more of the doorway space, trying to intimidate through physical presence. "Look, old man, maybe you didn't think this through properly," he said, with barely contained aggression. "Samantha has expenses, responsibilities. Kids need things. Kids whose mother threatens to keep them away from their grandparents when she doesn't get money," I replied evenly. "Kids being used as weapons in financial warfare." Samantha's face contorted with desperate, ugly fury. Fine. You want to play hardball? You'll never see your precious grandchildren again. Emma and Jake will grow up knowing their grandfather chose cold money over family. The words that had once been my greatest fear now felt powerless against the clarity I'd gained through her betrayal. I looked at my daughter and saw not the child I'd raised with love and sacrifice, but the manipulative stranger she'd chosen to become. Samantha, I said quietly, that's not a threat. That's a blessing. The shock on her face was complete and devastating. This was not the response she'd expected, not the crushing blow that had always brought me to my knees before. Peter's mouth fell open in stunned disbelief. What? If you're the kind of person who uses children as weapons against their grandparents, I continued with deadly calm, then perhaps it's better that they're not exposed to that kind of psychological manipulation while they're young and impressionable. Peter's expression shifted to something much darker, more dangerous. He stepped forward until he was close enough that I could smell the rage radiating from his pores. We know where you live, old man, he said, voice low and menacing. We know your routines, your schedule. You might want to reconsider your position very carefully. I felt Jessica tense behind me, but I remained perfectly still, unmoved by his attempt at intimidation. Are you threatening me, Peter? I'm just saying that family relationships work both ways, he continued with calculated malice. You want to cut us off? Fine. But don't expect us to just disappear quietly into the night. Actually, I said, that's exactly what I expect. And if you choose not to disappear quietly, that becomes a matter for law enforcement rather than family negotiation. Samantha grabbed Peter's arm, perhaps sensing he was pushing into territory that could have serious legal consequences. But her touch didn't calm him. It seemed to fuel his aggression. You think you're so smart, Peter continued, practically snarling. You think cutting off our money makes you powerful? There are other ways to get what we need, old man. I'm sure there are, I agreed with maddening calm. Like getting jobs, for instance. Novel concept, but people have been supporting themselves through employment for centuries. This isn't over, Samantha hissed, her desperation transforming into pure, concentrated venom. You'll regret treating us like this. Family doesn't abandon family, and there will be consequences for what you've done. There already are consequences, I said. You're living them right now. They stared at me for a long, tense moment, perhaps finally understanding that no amount of threats, guilt, or manipulation was going to restore their access to my resources. The man who had spent 30 years being their personal bank had simply closed. Without another word, Samantha spun on her heel and stalked back to their car with jerky, furious movements. Peter followed, but not before giving me one last menacing look that promised future retaliation. I watched them drive away, their car engine revving unnecessarily loud in what felt like a final act of impotent defiance. Only when their taillights disappeared completely did I close the front door and turn to Jessica. Her face was pale, but her eyes held something I hadn't seen in years. Pride. We're going to need legal advice, I said simply. Evening brought the quiet normalcy that had become precious in our house. Jessica and I sat at our kitchen table after dinner, the domestic routine providing comfort after the morning's chaos and confrontation. She sipped chamomile tea while I nursed my second cup of coffee, both of us processing the day's life-changing events. The kitchen had always been our sanctuary for serious conversations. It was here we'd discussed buying this house, planned for retirement, talked through early concerns about Samantha's struggles with money. Now it served as the place where we contemplated the complete breakdown of our family relationship. I keep thinking about when she was 8, Jessica said quietly, voice heavy with maternal grief. Remember the Mother's Day breakfast she made? Burned toast and orange juice with way too much pulp, but she was so proud, so eager to please. I did remember Samantha in her pink pajamas, standing on a kitchen stool to reach the counter, determined to surprise us with breakfast in bed. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else's family now, someone else's life. She used to draw us pictures, I said, throat tight with emotion. Stick figures of our family holding hands. I kept them in my office desk drawer for years. I still have some in that memory box upstairs. Jessica's voice carried deep maternal grief. William, she's still our daughter despite everything that's happened today. The words I'd been expecting all day. Jessica's instinct to heal, to find middle ground, to somehow restore what had been shattered. It was one of the qualities I'd fallen in love with. This unwavering belief that families could overcome anything with enough love and patience. Jess, I said gently. She crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I have one more step to take. Her teacup paused halfway to her lips. What kind of step? I looked at my wife's face, seeing the concern there, the fading hope that whatever I was planning might somehow bring our daughter back instead of pushing her further away. How could I explain that bringing her back was no longer the goal? Something permanent, I said. Something that ensures this morning's scene never happens again. You're talking about changing the will. It wasn't a question. Jessica knew me well enough to follow my thought process, to understand that legal protection was the only solution remaining. Among other things. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the implications. Changing our estate planning would be more than a financial decision. It would be a formal acknowledgement that our daughter was no longer trustworthy with our legacy. The grandchildren, she said finally. Emma and Jake will be better off not learning that love can be purchased with money, I said firmly. Jessica, what she did today wasn't desperation. It was calculated cruelty. The snake, the threats, the manipulation. That's who she's chosen to become. I reached across the table and took her hand in both of mine. If we cut her out completely, we protect ourselves from future abuse. We protect our marriage from constantly managing her crises. We protect our retirement from being slowly drained away by someone who sees us as a resource rather than parents. Jessica squeezed my hand, her thumb tracing across my knuckles in the gesture that had comforted me through decades of smaller challenges. This wasn't a smaller challenge, though. This was the end of something fundamental. Will it stop her? She asked. If you change everything legally, will she finally leave us alone? It will remove her incentive for contact, I said with grim certainty. No access to money, no inheritance to protect, no leverage to maintain. She'll have to find other people to manipulate. The pragmatism of it felt cold but absolutely necessary. Samantha would move on to easier targets, people who hadn't yet learned to recognize her patterns of manipulation and exploitation. I hate that it's come to this, Jessica whispered. So do I. But I won't spend our remaining years being held hostage by threats and manipulation. I won't let her destroy what we've built together. Outside our kitchen window, the suburban evening continued its peaceful rhythm. The Hendersons were walking their dog. Mrs. Patterson was watering her garden. Normal people living normal lives, probably not dealing with adult children who terrorized their parents. When will you do it? Jessica asked. Tomorrow morning. I'll call Margaret Summers first thing. She's handled our legal work for 15 years. She'll know exactly what needs to be done to make it ironclad. Jessica nodded slowly, accepting the inevitable even as it broke her heart. And if Samantha finds out? She will eventually. But by then the legal protections will be in place. Her anger won't be able to touch us anymore. I stood up from the table, carrying our empty cups to the sink. Behind me, I heard Jessica's quiet sigh. Not disagreement, but grief for the daughter we'd lost somewhere along the way. Tomorrow I would take that final step. Tonight I would hold my wife and let her mourn the family we'd thought we were. Margaret Summers' law office occupied the third floor of a granite building downtown, its walls lined with legal volumes that spoke of 15 years protecting families like ours. I sat across from her mahogany desk with a manila folder of documents, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. William, she said, removing her reading glasses to focus completely on me. When you called this morning, you mentioned needing comprehensive legal protection. Tell me what's been happening. Margaret had handled our wills, property transfers, and Jessica's mother's estate. She knew us as the stable couple who planned ahead and paid bills promptly. What I was about to describe would sound like a different family entirely. I explained the inheritance argument, the snake delivery, the blocked credit cards, yesterday's threatening confrontation on our doorstep. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more serious with each horrifying detail. Peter said they know where we live, know our routines, I concluded. It felt like a direct threat against our safety. She set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. William, this goes far beyond a simple family disagreement. You're describing harassment and intimidation with escalating violence. We need to address this on multiple fronts. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Margaret pulled out a fresh legal pad. Let's start with your will. You mentioned wanting to restructure your inheritance completely. I want my money to go to my grandchildren's education, not to my daughter's casino accounts, I said with absolute finality. That's a very wise decision, William. Her voice carried professional warmth mixed with approval. We can create an educational trust fund that provides for Emma and Jake's schooling, college expenses, and legitimate educational needs while preventing any access by their parents. She outlined the framework with impressive efficiency. An independent trustee would manage the funds, releasing money only for documented educational expenses. Samantha and Peter would have no access, no control, no ability to manipulate the children's inheritance for their own destructive purposes. What about Jessica? I asked. Fully protected, of course, the house, your retirement accounts, her complete security. Nothing changes there. This restructuring only affects what would have gone to Samantha. Next came the restraining order documentation. Margaret opened a new file and began systematically recording yesterday's confrontation, the threatening language, the escalating pattern that had culminated in actual intimidation. The snake incident is particularly concerning, she said, writing quickly. Using live animals to frighten elderly parents shows planning and malice that courts take very seriously. How long does this process take? The will modifications can be finalized within the week. The restraining order can be filed today. Once it's granted, any contact from Samantha or Peter becomes a legal matter, rather than a family dispute. I felt something release in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying for months without even realizing it. The weight of being perpetually available for Samantha's crises, of walking on eggshells to avoid triggering her threats, of enabling destructive behavior out of misguided love. All of it was ending. There's one more thing, Margaret said seriously. Based on what you've described, I recommend documenting everything for potential future legal action. Keep records of any attempts to contact you, any violations, any attempts to involve the grandchildren as weapons. You think it will get worse before it gets better? People who use manipulation and threats don't usually accept boundaries gracefully, she said with the wisdom of experience. When Samantha discovers she's been cut out of your will and served with a restraining order, her reaction may be significant. But that no longer frightened me. With legal protections in place, her anger would be directed at a system designed to handle such behavior, not at two elderly parents trying to enjoy their retirement in peace. Margaret's assistant brought in the prepared documents. As I signed my name to each page, I felt the satisfying finality of decisions made and implemented. 30 years of financial enabling was officially ending. The restraining order should be approved by end of business today, Margaret said as I stood to leave. Court officers will serve both Samantha and Peter by tomorrow morning. After that, any contact with you or Jessica becomes a criminal matter. I shook hands with the woman who had just helped me reclaim control of my own life. Outside her office windows, the city continued its normal rhythm, but my world had fundamentally changed. William, Margaret called as I reached her door. You've made the right choices. Your family's safety and security come first. Always. I nodded, tucking the folder under my arm. Tomorrow morning, Samantha would discover that manipulation was no longer an option. Tonight, Jessica and I would sleep peacefully, knowing the law was finally on our side. 2 days passed in the most profound, healing quiet I'd experienced in years. Jessica and I fell back into comfortable routines that had been constantly interrupted by Samantha's manufactured crises. Morning coffee without dreading phone calls, afternoon walks without checking for missed messages, evening dinners without discussing the latest financial emergency that required immediate resolution. On Thursday afternoon, Margaret called to confirm what I'd been anticipating. "William, the documents were delivered at 2:15 today. Both Samantha and Peter have been served with the restraining order, and they've received copies of the will modifications. It's done." I thanked her and hung up, then sat quietly in my chair for several minutes. Outside our window, Mrs. Patterson was planting spring flowers in her garden. The Hendersons' children were riding bicycles on the sidewalk. Normal suburban life, continuing its peaceful rhythm, while my family drama finally reached its legal conclusion. "The papers were delivered," Jessica asked from the kitchen doorway. "This afternoon," I confirmed. "It's finished." She came and sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. We didn't need to discuss what Samantha's reaction might be, or whether she would try to find ways around the legal barriers Margaret had erected. The law was crystal clear. The protections were comprehensive, and for the first time in 30 years, we were truly free from her manipulation. I thought about the daughter I'd raised, the little girl who'd drawn stick figure families and made breakfast in bed on special occasions. That child had grown into someone who sent live snakes to her father and threatened to weaponize his grandchildren against him. The transformation had been gradual enough that I'd spent decades making excuses for increasingly unacceptable behavior. But the woman who'd stood on my doorstep demanding money and making threats wasn't someone I needed to enable any longer. The legal documents had created the boundaries that love alone could never establish. Ironically, they'd given Samantha exactly what she'd always threatened. She was no longer in our lives. "She got what she wanted," I said quietly. "I'm no longer in their lives." The irony wasn't lost on me. Samantha had spent years threatening to cut off my access to Emma and Jake whenever I didn't comply with her financial demands. Now, through her own escalating behavior, she'd ensured that separation permanently, while simultaneously losing any claim to the inheritance she'd been so desperate to control. Emma and Jake would be provided for through their educational trust fund, managed by professionals who couldn't be manipulated or threatened. Their college expenses, tutoring, books, legitimate educational needs, all secured without giving their parents access to resources they'd proven incapable of managing responsibly. Jessica squeezed my hand. "Do you think she understands what she's lost?" "She will," I said with quiet certainty. "The restraining order means any attempt to contact us becomes a criminal matter. The will changes mean there's no inheritance to fight for, no financial incentive to maintain even hostile contact. She'll have to find other people to manipulate. And if she violates the restraining order, then it becomes the police department's problem, not ours." For 30 years, I'd been Samantha's safety net, catching her every fall while she learned nothing from the experience. I'd sold my classic car to pay her gambling debts. I'd covered her rent when she claimed unexpected emergencies. I'd written check after check, always believing that this time would be different. This crisis would be the last one. The snake had been her final communication with me. Everything she wanted to say about our relationship had been contained in that box. Dangerous, venomous, designed to frighten and intimidate. But instead of driving me back into compliance, it had driven me to Margaret's office and the legal protections I should have sought years earlier. As the sun set through our kitchen window, Jessica and I prepared dinner together with the easy cooperation of a couple who no longer carried the weight of constant family drama. No phone calls interrupted our conversation. No emergency texts demanded immediate financial rescue. No threats hung over our heads about access to grandchildren. The quiet felt profound, like the silence after a long, exhausting storm has finally passed completely. Tomorrow we would wake up in a house legally protected from harassment. Our retirement savings would remain intact, earning interest for our own security rather than being slowly drained by someone else's poor choices. Our marriage would continue without the constant stress of managing an adult child's manufactured crises. I had reclaimed my role as a father who loved his daughter enough to refuse to enable her destruction of herself and others. Legal boundaries had replaced emotional manipulation. Professional consequences had replaced family guilt. The law had given me back my life. Tonight, for the first time in decades, I would sleep without wondering what tomorrow's crisis would cost me. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. To listen to the next powerful story, click on the video that appears on your screen. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to say no.